In 1607, after some earlier failed attempts, English colonists settled in what's now known as Virginia. 4/5 of them died. In 1620, English separatists, who we now know today as the Pilgrims, settled at the base of Cape Cod, and half of them died. In 1630, a fleet of 11 ships carrying 700 English Puritan colonists began the Great Migration to the Massachusetts Bay Colony, despite the earlier failed attempts and the horrific experiences of the Jamestown and Plymouth colonies. My name is Andy Volpe. I am a member of the Salem Train Band. We recreate the Massachusetts Bay Militia as it appeared in 1629. Mark Millman, one of our other members, was unable to record himself, and he had wrote some commentaries about survival and perseverance, and he had asked me to record some. Massachusetts Bay Company and its colonists were aware of what happened in Jamestown and Plymouth. They had gathered all the information about the Americas and colonization that they could get their hands on, including several works by John Smith, and from Mort's Relation, a 1622 account of Plymouth's early days by William Bradford, Edward Winslow, and other Mayflower passengers. Far from disheartening the later colonists like those of Mass Bay, the trials of the earlier colonists seems to have actually strengthened the Mass Bay colonists' resolve to succeed. Massachusetts Bay's Royal Charter in 1629 allowed the colony to be self-governing, although why this is remains a bit of a mystery. The colony had been conceived as an opportunity for Puritans to escape repression in England. In 1628, the company's directors had sent an advance party of 100 colonists well equipped with provisions and arms, led by John Endicott, an investor and later governor of the colony, to establish themselves in Naumkeag in Massachusetts and join the remnants of a bankrupt settlement which had moved south from present-day Gloucester. When King Charles I dissolved Parliament in 1629, the directors seized their opportunity, buying out members who would not immigrate to the new colony and ensuring its autonomy. At the same time, they sent another 300 immigrants, led by one of the first ministers of the colony, the Reverend Francis Higginson, to reinforce the fledgling town, and he renamed it Salem. The Mass Bay colonists were very well prepared for their venture. We know this because many of the purchase records survive. Our group, the Salem Train Band, recreates the colony's militia as it existed in its early days, and we're most familiar with the military equipment, which included 100 uniform coats for the party under Endicott, 100 muskets of 4 different types, 60 pikes, 20 half-pikes, 60 sets of armor, and helmets of 2 different types. Each of these men who were employees of the company were also given, among other items, pairs of shoes and stockings, suits, some of leather and some of wool, shirts, hats of 3 different kinds, cloaks, and so on. They were also, unusually for colonists at this time, mostly what we would think of as middle-class families. Other English colonies like Jamestown and Barbados were filled with young men looking to make their fortunes and quickly return to England. But Mass Bay was settled by people who meant to stay. In many cases, they sold their land and possessions in England to afford their shares in the company and the equipment that they needed for their new lives. They often came 3 generations of families at a time and staked all of their futures on the colony's success, which meant that they were indeed deeply invested. The incentives were not only financial, but they were also social and religious. They were constructing a new way of life in keeping with their beliefs and would not tolerate failure. John Winthrop refers to this in his speech, A Model of Christian Charity, in which he famously describes the colony as a city upon the hill. And he warns that the eyes of all people are upon us. If Massachusetts Bay failed, the Puritan ideal would be discredited. The colonists' success was grounded on their tenacity and their determination, aided by their thorough planning, extensive preparations, and rooted in their profound faith. They avoided the disasters that ravaged the early colonies, and their fundamental optimism sustained them in establishing a viable society that would persist for more than 2 centuries.